All right, guys, this is the first video talking about constraints in OnShape, and I wanted to first of all show you how to do some what they call intuitive constraints, or basically the program itself is trying to figure out if you want to do a constraint or not, and trying to make that happen for you. So, for instance, I have the front plane visible here, and I also have the right and top planes visible. You can see that by, oops, hold on, I'm in a tool. Okay, you can, all those are visible. When I go to look at this normal to the front plane, I still can see the axes, all right, that represent the top and the right sketch planes. Because I can see those, there are things that OnShape will automatically do. For instance, if I tap close to this line, it's going to think that I want to get right on where that top plane is going through the origin and through the front plane. And then if I tap right here, it's probably going to try to get it right on that spot. Now when I do that, all right, so let's say I'm done with the line tool. When I do that, you'll notice that there are some constraints listed here. The horizontal constraint is basically showing me that my point, so this one that's over here close to my finger, my point has been made horizontal to the origin, all right? Likewise, my vertical constraint, my top point of my line is being shown to be vertical compared to the origin as well. All right, vertical meaning vertically positioned above it. So it automatically made those constraints. So if I go and tap on this point and I move it, it's going to stay on that axis. Okay, it can go below, it can go above the origin, but it's going to stay on that axis. Likewise, if I tap on this point, got to turn that one off, and I try to move, okay, I'm trying to go all over the place here, but it's only moving left and right. Okay, so those have been constrained in that sort of way automatically. Now let's go to make another line, and I'll show you some other stuff. So if I go to make a line, and I'm going to start at this point right here. Now the easiest way, by the way, to ensure that you start where you want to is to tap and hold somewhere off away from where you are, and then notice that there's a little square there. And that square is telling you, hey, I'm going to lock it to this point that's by here. So if you don't want it to be there, you're going to have to put it somewhere else for now. All right, so it's going to lock it right there. So I'm going to lock to that point, and then I need to put the other end of my line. Okay, now if I do this, notice how there's a little bit of a dashed line there? That's occurring at a 45-degree angle. All right, so 45 will work. It'll try to go straight down. Okay, so there's that. And then it'll also do that if it thinks I want to be horizontal from that line. All right. Anytime those dashed lines show up, actually, I don't know if it's horizontal. Actually, I think what that's doing is it's mimicking the angle over here. All right, it's mimicking that angle. Notice that? All right. So I've got that. I've got this 45 thing. I'm going to come way down here. All right. It's mimicking that angle. And then this one's perfectly down below. Now let's check out that mimicking the angle, and then we'll do a horizontal one next. So if I do this, all right, I'm going to let that go. I'm just curious now. I'm going to try to discover something here as well. If I move this point out, all right, it's actually staying perpendicular. It actually, that line was developing a perpendicular constraint. All right, that's why it was a dashed line. So it's trying to see if I wanted to be perpendicular to that line. All right, cool. So then the next one is we're going to start at this point. We're going to go perfectly horizontal. All right, and then I'm going to turn this off. So if I, again, look at my constraints, there are a bunch of constraints here. My perpendicular one, showing me that those two lines are perpendicular to each other. That's been established automatically for me. I did not have to do anything there. It's kind of crazy. We have this horizontal, we have that horizontal constraint, which was already established earlier. We have a new horizontal constraint, which is this line is horizontal. And we did that using that automatic feature. And then coincident, the coincident constraints are basically when two like points are right on top of each other, or a point is right on a line. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, with a little bit more frequency. Okay, so there's that. So now the last thing I wanted to show you is that coincident thing. So if I go to put my first point on for this next line, I'm going to draw it over here. All right. This is actually, you can tell, since that's not sliding anywhere, that's actually the midpoint. So I could actually force this to be on the midpoint, or I could bring it up here. It's not on the midpoint. See how it can slide? All right. So it's not going to force a midpoint, but it's going to force what's called a coincident. It's going to force it to be on that line somewhere. All right. And then I'll just drag it off here and be crazy. Now, look at that. This is getting that other point to be exactly horizontal to the midpoint. If I drag it over here, it's going to be exactly vertical to the midpoint. See that? Pretty crazy stuff. All right. So let's say I wanted to drag it out. I didn't want it to be special in any other way. All right. So if I now get off that tool and I click that point and I drag it, okay, it's coincident. It's staying with that point. So if I bring that point to the right, it's going to quote unquote stay on that line. Now notice that it goes off of the line out here, and that's totally fine. It's going to stay on the line itself, not just the segment. All right. So there's that. And that's because it's coincident. If I try to move this other point, okay, that can go anywhere. It doesn't really have any constraints on it at all. It can go anywhere. Now I could force it to constrain to this one by dragging it. All right, I can force it to constrain to the midpoint of that line. I could force it to be, all sorts of stuff. All right, so if I do that, now what's going to happen is if I start to move some of these other points, all right, all those constraints are going to be still working. All right, see that? Crazy stuff. All right, so I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the constraints that are automatically tied there, and in how you do that without actually having to pick a constraint to work with. All right, so there's always constraints going on in the background if you're paying attention to what the lines look like or the features look like when you're putting them on.